I'm Alan Nettleton again. I'm from Connected Places Catapult, and I'm delighted to introduce you to the afternoon session where we're focusing on zero-emission heavy goods vehicles and their infrastructure. And I'm delighted to have both Margarita Vigrande-Ashe, Marge as she's better known, who leads the hydrogen team and the zero-emission HGVs team within DFT, and Isabella, Panovic, who is the program lead for the ZHID, as it's come to know, the Zero Emission HGVs and Infrastructure Demonstrations program. A subject quite close to my heart because we at the Catapult have been involved in this for a number of years now, and it's really grown from sort of the concept phase right up to this, what is now a really exciting, flourishing demonstration. So I'm going to hand over to Marge and Isabella to start talking about the programme. So over to you.
Thanks, Alan. Yeah, thank you so much, and hi everyone. As Alan said, I'm Marge, so from Department for Transport, and really the focus of my role is zero emission HGVs and looking at the transition, so moving from the current state to how do we get to battery electric and hydrogen fuel cell. So this demonstrator program is really one of our key work streams, and working together with Isabella on this and with the rest of the Innovate team has been really, really important. And I think just listening to all of the sessions over the course of the day, the point on collaboration and really involving as many different parts of the sector, but also as many government departments as possible, because of course there's element on skills, there's element on apprenticeships, there's with DESNA's colleagues about supply of hydrogen, so if we're looking at demand, so it's really just kind of really brought home the importance of collaborative work.
Yeah, I think definitely can speak to that, given the scale of the programme as well. So £200 million of funding for projects. And speaking to the project specifically, there's over 60 partners involved at a sort of funded level, and then all of the projects themselves have a really wide associate network as well that they're working with, and that's just the sort of that's just the core program activity. There's also that wider stakeholder engagement and the work streams that are being delivered through BSI CPC as well, really sort of covering the support that the sector needs to fully decarbonise and to move towards the zero emission HGV technologies. So I'd agree, collaboration is key. Yeah. And I think as well there's some really key learnings in terms of the sort of different things that the projects are trying to do as well. They're all sort of got their own unique selling points, their own particular niche work packages and activities. So I don't know if you want to talk to that in terms of what the different projects themselves are and what they're doing.
Yeah, of course. So this is the ZHID, or we're referring to them by the full name so that everybody knows. It's a zero emission HGV and infrastructure demonstrator program, where essentially we're funding 4 programs, 4 consortia to be delivering both the vehicle itself but also the infrastructure to either charge or fuel. And we've got 2 projects that are focusing on battery electric HGVs, 1 project that's exclusively focusing on hydrogen and doing lots of really exciting things, and then a project that's focusing on both hydrogen, fuel cell and battery electric. And as part of that, as I mentioned, it's so important to have the fueling and charging sites, because the question that we get so often is, it's such a large investment into the vehicle that operators really need to be sure that if they will be purchasing or leasing the vehicle, that there will be somewhere that they can conveniently recharge it, be that en route or the depot. So through this demonstrator program, we're sort of kick-starting the process of getting the sites up and running. But I think as part of that, and as the previous panel was saying, dissemination of information is so important. So getting the knowledge out, getting the lessons learned. So I kind of want to throw it back to you like what the role of evaluation and monitoring do you see?
So I mean, when we look at the actual overarching objectives for the program, kind of the core need for it is to support uptake in the sector and to provide confidence in the operators and the hauliers that are involved in the program, but also more widely. So data is a really big part of that, and gathering that understanding. So as you mentioned, we've got battery electric and hydrogen fuel cell. It's technology agnostic, so we're taking a really wide view of it, and the data itself is intended in that way too. So crucially, we have an overarching independent technical evaluation that sits above the 4 projects themselves, and that's led by Ricardo in partnership with Costain and the Centre for Sustainable Road Freight. And they'll be monitoring the 4 projects throughout their entire demonstration period, so all the way through to the end of 2030. And yeah, the data and learnings from that piece is going to build that operator confidence. We're going to be sort of seeing reporting and dissemination coming out of that as well. And yeah, I think you can't really understate the importance of the technical evaluation in that overarching picture of the projects themselves. I think as well this really delivers on some of the Department of Transport's core objectives around supporting the sector and doing things in that way. I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about what your objectives are and what you hope to get out of the programme.
Yeah, so the programme is all about not trialing the technologies, but demonstrating how they perform in real world. So I think there's lots of information from the wonderful OEMs, so the manufacturers that we have, about the range, about performance, but I think it's, unless you see the vehicles in the real world on roads hauling real loads, and the example I always use is, it's when a truck or HGV is driving up a hill and it's fully loaded and the wipers are working and the driver has heating or air conditioning. How does that affect performance? And then maintenance, we think that they're going to be easier to maintain, but let's see, how does that go? What is going to be, what are some of the challenges? What can the government do? How can we come together as a sort of holistic approach to decarbonisation? How can we support SMEs? Because majority of the haulage sector is actually made up of SMEs. So it's really important for us to be able to get that information through to them, to have a conversation. But also we're doing an infrastructure strategy that'll be coming out sometime this year. And it is focusing on both zero emission HGVs and coaches. And that's where we'll be taking some of the early lessons learned from the demonstrator, but also the information provided by the call up for evidence that we had in December, and really setting out at the moment what the current view is for the roles of both government and industry and how to facilitate this rollout. So it's really kind of the year that we focus on the HGV. So if last year there was a huge focus on cars and vans, this is the year that we're really turning our attention to HGVs and doing the strategy, the demonstrator, and then of course thinking about sort of a regulatory approach as well.
And feel free to ask questions via the Slido, or if you're in the room, please feel free. But a quick couple of questions from myself. So there's a lot of freight operators involved in these demonstrations, both large and small. What's their enthusiasm for this trial? What's their incentive for taking part, and how are they approaching things?
Yeah, so a lot of them have got really ambitious sustainability plans. They really have sustainability at the core of their business. So I think we're quite fortunate about having a good mix of those operators. You mentioned SMEs. We've got some quite good SME participation, for instance, in the Voltempo-led project. There's a lot of SME participation there. But I also think the wider operators as well, there's a lot of big name companies involved, and I think it's really key for them because they get this first mover advantage. They get all the learnings and they get to participate in this quite an involved, quite an interesting program. And they get to take those learnings back to their business to support their own decarbonisation journey, because obviously we have the phase out dates for zero emission, for HGVs to be zero emission at 2035 or 2040, depending on the weight class. So there's a real drive to get there, and these businesses recognise that by taking an initiative in moving towards that target, they can better support their business, agility and in looking to the future, how they're going to operate.
And just questions coming in. So vehicles and fueling stations have been mentioned. How do you see the skills landscape changing in industry, and how does this factor into the projects?
Yeah, so I think that's a super important question that we're very keen not to, just focus on the vehicles and infrastructure. Of course, hugely important, but then I think it's about the entire system. And I think it was the speakers before us were talking about, the systems approach and, who's going to be maintaining the vehicles. Hydrogen, how do we support the movement of hydrogen? How do we make sure that the fueling stations are safe, and that how do we make sure that if there is a charging network that it's interoperable? So we get a lot of our freight is coming in on the back of an EU HGV. How do we make sure that either our hauliers going to the EU or vice versa, that they have the ability to charge or fuel in the way that they need to? So, kind of looking at the sites around Dover as one of the projects is excitingly acquired a site in Kent. Sort of all of these things. But yeah, skills is absolutely a crucial part of that.
I think there's a piece as well for the operators in upskilling the drivers as well. Like and the drivers for many of them, there's a kind of a change journey in terms of becoming comfortable with the new vehicles. There are differences in the way that they're driven and how they operate. So there's a skills piece there as well, I think.
Yeah. Sorry, I feel very far away from you, but I've got a cold, so it's probably for the best. Perhaps one for you, Isabella. What are the highlights of the demonstration so far? I mean, obviously we're at early stages.
Yeah, I think definitely we're at early stages. I think possibly for me, the big highlight was last week. We hosted our first program event, and I think that was a really nice way to see it all to come together, like physically in terms of, we had a really great room of people, and I think the fact that it was quite evenly split between people who were part of the project, but people who were interested in the project and keen to learn more, that really links back to the objective around supporting the sector and building the enthusiasm for these technologies. So that's probably like my standout moment. I can't, there's plenty more, I'm sure. I think when we start seeing, for instance, the first vehicles on the road and the first sites opening, that's going to be really exciting.
Yeah, and a good question here. Grid connectivity is vital for new charging sites and hydrogen refuelling hubs that use electrolysis. How closely are we working with National Grid, or I suppose with the distribution network operators, to support the move to mass adoption?
Yeah. So I think I can start and you can chip in. So we have National Grid on our core delivery group, one of our governance structures. So they feed in directly into our thinking and project development over the course of this critical building phase. I think as well we've recognised that grid connections and DNO conversations are one of the most significant barriers at this stage. And the projects, in terms of their site surveys and their infrastructure surveys, one of the first things that they have to do is have that conversation around what's the grid connection going to look like? Is it viable on the timelines that we have? Because some of the timelines aren't feasible on some of the sites. So fully recognise the importance of that, and I would say that all of them have very much engaged in those conversations at quite an early stage. It's happened from the get-go pretty much.
So, and just to supplement that, sort of the government level, so we are of course talking very closely to DESNZ and to Ofgem, and just making sure that there is that link up, that everybody is aware of everybody else's plans, of everybody else's projections, and so there is that degree of synchronicity around if we're moving to zero emission HGVs by this date, then of course there needs to be a link up and making sure that there are these connections are indeed for hydrogen to be supplied or produced. And also we're learning lessons from our own Project Rapid, and sort of the lessons from cars and vans, which have went through an electrification journey, and from previous projects that DFT ran for hydrogen. So the importance of co-locating supply and demand to make sure that there is enough demand for hydrogen and hydrogen refueling stations to be functional. So collaboration, I think, is a huge piece in kind of rising above the silos and encouraging, sure, we're all talk to each other.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a few questions here related to the technology and perhaps the what we're seeking to test, which is which of these technologies is going to be most appropriate for which use case. I mean, it's a question we get often. Do you think hydrogen's going to win? Do you think battery's going to win? Do you think it's going to be something else? We don't know the answer. It'll be good to get the official answer from the government, Marge, if you can.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised that this question has come up. I think this is absolutely kind of what's on everybody's mind, because these HGVs, they are an investment, and we completely understand that. So with the strategy, we're hoping to give our first, assessment of where we are with the demonstrators, where we are with the evidence provided by Call for Evidence. But I think, as Isabella said, well, not I think, but I know, so we remain technology neutral, so there is a role for hydrogen fuel cell and for battery electric. The demonstrators will really be demonstrating how each technology performs. So, sort of based on initial kind of information from manufacturers, and hydrogen fuel cell HGVs seem to offer the longer range, seems to be faster refueling. And battery electric HGVs are available now, sort of the shorter journeys. And so I think it's a really interesting time. And I think with infrastructure strategy, this is not going to be the end of the conversation. I think it's going to be kind of an ongoing. So I know it's not kind of a real answer, but I think it's genuinely, there are roles for both technologies. And
yeah, absolutely. And I think we couldn't agree more. Anybody that tells you they know the answer is lying. So the clock's telling us we're out of time.
Oh,
so that flew past.
Did, yeah.
That is right, isn't it? 15 minutes. Yeah. So put your hands together, please. Isabella.